Before we begin, welcome back. If you enjoy true stories to listen to before sleep, please subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment with your thoughts or experiences. Your support helps Shadow Storyteller bring more stories like this to life. Now listen closely. If you have ever driven past a quiet house in America and felt your stomach tighten for no reason, this story is for you. I survived that house, and sometimes I wonder if it ever truly let me leave. My name is Calder Haynes, and this happened on a Tuesday night, just after 10:30 in the evening in the early fall of 2011, in a small town outside Ashland, Oregon. The air smelled like wet leaves and pine sap, and the sky hung low with clouds that pressed down on the streets, making every porch light look dimmer than it should have. I had just accepted a short-term job restoring old properties. The pay was decent, the town was quiet, and the house came with free lodging. That alone should have been my first warning. Locals called it the Briarwood Place, a narrow two-story house tucked behind overgrown hedges at the end of Maplethorne Road. No one said it was haunted. They said something worse. They said people did not stay long. I arrived at exactly 6:05 in the evening. I remember checking my watch because the silence was unsettling. No dogs barking. No cars passing. Just the wind brushing against dead branches, tapping the siding like fingernails testing for weakness. The front door opened without resistance. Inside, the air was cold, too cold for a house with no running air system. My breath fogged slightly and I laughed it off, nervous but practical. Old houses held cold, that was all. The first night passed quietly, or so I thought. At 3:12 in the morning, I woke to the sound of movement above me. Slow footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. The problem was simple. There was no floor above the second story. I lay there, heart pounding, counting each step as it crossed the ceiling, paused, then continued as if whoever it was had forgotten something and turned back. By the third night, the house had begun to feel awake. Doors I closed were open again, not wide, just enough to notice. The smell changed from dust and wood to something sour and metallic. At 7:45 in the evening on Thursday, while reviewing blueprints at the kitchen table, I heard a voice whisper my name. Not shouted. Not threatening. Curious. As if testing how it sounded in the air. Calder. I stood so fast the chair fell backward. My chest burned and my hands shook. I searched every room. Nothing. No one. When I returned to the kitchen, the blueprints were gone. In their place sat a single object. A house key, blackened with age, resting exactly where my hands had been. The records showed the house had been built in the late 1920s. One owner, Merrick Vale. He vanished in the winter of 1937. No body. No answers. Just an empty house sealed and reopened decades later, again and again to people like me. The worst night came on Sunday. 11:28 in the evening. A storm rolled in, thunder cracking so close the walls vibrated. The power went out, plunging the house into a darkness that felt thick, almost solid. I reached for my flashlight. It flickered once, then died. From the hallway came the sound of breathing. Slow. Wet. Patient. I backed into the living room, my heel catching on the rug. I fell hard, knocking the air from my lungs. That was when I saw the outline at the end of the hall. Tall. Too tall. Its head brushed the ceiling, bending at an angle no human neck could manage. The smell became overwhelming. Rot. Cold earth. It spoke without moving its mouth. You are standing where I stood. The walls began to creak, not from the storm, but from pressure, as if the house itself was tightening around us. Images flooded my mind that were not my own. A man screaming into empty rooms. Fingernails breaking against locked doors. Years of being alone, unheard, unfound. I ran. I do not remember opening the door. I remember hitting the gravel outside, tearing down Maplethorne Road in the rain, barefoot, bleeding, gasping for air that tasted clean and alive. The house lights turned on behind me, every window glowing at once, like eyes opening in the dark. Authorities called it stress, hallucination, sleep deprivation. The job contract was quietly canceled. The house remained standing. For sale again last I checked. I live 3 states away now. New town. New work. But sometimes at exactly 3:12 in the morning I wake up cold, certain I hear footsteps above me. And sometimes, just before sleep takes me again, I smell rust in the air, and I know the house remembers me too. I tried to convince myself it was over. That the distance, the new address, the unfamiliar streets, all of it had broken whatever fragile connection that house had carved into me. During the day, that belief almost worked. Sunlight through unfamiliar windows, the normal rhythm of traffic, the casual nods of neighbors who did not know my name, all of it felt grounding. But nights were different. The first week after I moved, I noticed small things. The bedroom door would be ajar when I was certain I had closed it. My phone alarm failed twice, both times stopping at 3:12 in the morning without explanation. I told myself electronics malfunctioned. Old habits clung to the mind when fear once took root. On the ninth night, I dreamed of Maplethorne Road. In the dream, I was standing across the street from Briarwood Place. The hedges were taller, thicker, swallowing the porch entirely. Every window was dark except one on the second floor. I felt drawn to it, the way a magnet pulls metal without effort or sound. As I stepped closer, the ground softened beneath my feet, turning to mud that clung and slowed me. From the window, something watched. I woke up choking on air, sheets twisted around my legs, heart racing so violently I thought it might tear free. The digital clock beside the bed glowed softly. 3:12. After that, the dreams became frequent. Not every night, but often enough that I dreaded sleep. In them, the house was never the same, yet always familiar. Sometimes the walls breathed, expanding and contracting like lungs. Other times the rooms stretched endlessly, hallways looping back into themselves no matter how far I ran. And always there was a presence. Watching. Waiting. I stopped unpacking. Boxes remained stacked against the walls as if I had never fully arrived. Friends noticed the change in my voice when we spoke on the phone. They said I sounded distant, distracted. I did not tell them why. How could I explain that a house was following me not through space but through memory? 2 months passed. One evening, just after sunset, there was a knock at my door. I froze. No one ever knocked. People texted. They called. The sound felt wrong, too deliberate, too slow. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, patient. I checked the peephole. A man stood on the other side, tall and thin, wearing a dark coat despite the mild weather. His face was partially obscured by shadow, but his posture made my stomach tighten. I opened the door anyway. He introduced himself as Roland Pierce, said he worked for a historical preservation office back in Oregon. His voice was calm, professional, yet his eyes never quite met mine. "We have a few unanswered questions about Briarwood Place," he said. "Your name came up." I felt the room tilt slightly. I had never given permission for my information to be shared. When I asked how he found me, he smiled, thin and brief. "The house keeps records," he said. In its own way. That should have been the moment I shut the door. Instead, I let him in. He sat across from me at the small kitchen table, hands folded, fingers pale and stiff. He told me things I had never read in any report. Merrick Vale had not vanished immediately. He had lived inside that house for years after everyone believed him gone. Trapped, unheard, slowly unraveling as the house changed around him. "It does not let go easily," Roland said quietly. "Especially not of those who listen." I asked him what he wanted. "To see if it followed you," he replied. The lights flickered. Roland's eyes finally lifted, focusing on the hallway behind me. His expression shifted, just slightly, from curiosity to something closer to dread. "It did," he whispered. The temperature dropped. The air thickened, carrying that same metallic scent I remembered all too well. From the hallway came the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. Not above us. Inside my home. I backed away as the shadows deepened, stretching unnaturally along the walls. Roland stood, backing toward the door, his composure cracking. "You were never meant to leave," a voice murmured, layered and wrong, echoing from everywhere at once. The walls creaked, wood groaning as pressure built. Paint cracked. The floor vibrated beneath my feet. Images flooded my mind again, stronger than before. Endless nights. Screaming into silence. A man becoming part of the house because there was nothing else left. I screamed back, louder than I thought possible. "No, I'm not yours." For a moment everything stopped. The footsteps retreated. The air warmed. The smell faded. Roland collapsed into a chair, trembling. He left without another word, refusing to meet my eyes. That was the last night the house came for me directly. But survival does not always mean escape. Years have passed now. I avoid old neighborhoods. I never live alone anymore. I sleep with lights on, doors locked, noise playing softly to fill the silence. Yet sometimes when I pass a quiet house at the edge of a road, one with dark windows and overgrown hedges, my chest tightens. Because I recognize the feeling of being watched. And I know deep down that somewhere Briarwood Place is still standing, waiting patiently, remembering my name and hoping that one night I will finally stop running. I told myself that knowing was better than wondering. That if the house remembered me, at least I remembered it too. There was some twisted comfort in naming the fear, in shaping it with language instead of letting it lurk undefined in the dark corners of my thoughts. That comfort did not last. It began with sounds again. Not footsteps this time, but knocking. Always 3 times. Always slow. Always at moments when the world was quiet enough for my pulse to be the loudest thing in the room. At first it happened only at night. Then gradually, it crept into the early morning hours. Once, disturbingly, it happened just after noon while sunlight flooded the living room and birds chirped outside as if nothing was wrong. Each time when I opened the door, no one was there. No footprints. No passing cars. No neighbors peering curiously from their windows. Just the lingering smell of rust, faint but unmistakable, curling into my lungs like a warning. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, sensations. What I felt before the sounds and what lingered after. The notes filled 3 notebooks within a year. Patterns emerged, ones I did not want to acknowledge. The disturbances always intensified when I felt most settled, most convinced that my life was finally moving forward. It was as if the house hated stability. I changed jobs again, this time moving into a larger apartment complex in a busier city. More noise, more people, more light. I thought it would drown whatever thread still connected me to Briarwood Place. For a while it worked. Then one evening as I waited for the elevator, I noticed the smell. Old wood, damp earth. The elevator doors opened slowly, revealing an empty car. The interior lights flickered, dimming just enough to cast the corners into shadow. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to take the stairs. But exhaustion won. Usually did. The doors slid shut behind me with a dull thud. As the elevator descended, the air grew colder. The digital floor indicator blinked erratically, skipping numbers, stalling between levels. Halfway down, the elevator stopped. The lights went out. In the darkness, something exhaled behind me. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to feel. "You left the door open," the voice said softly. My knees buckled. I pressed myself against the wall, hands shaking so badly I could barely keep them raised. "I did not leave anything open," I whispered, though I knew it was useless to argue. The air shifted. I felt pressure at my back, not a hand, not a body, but something vast and immovable, like a wall slowly leaning in. "You listened," it replied. That was enough. The lights snapped back on. The elevator lurched and resumed its descent as if nothing had happened. When the doors opened in the lobby, I stumbled out, gasping, drawing concerned looks from strangers who had no idea how close I had come to breaking. That night, I dreamed of Merrick Vale. For the first time, I saw his face clearly. Hollow eyes. Skin stretched tight over bone. His mouth opened and closed without sound, screaming into rooms that absorbed everything and gave nothing back. I realized with a sinking certainty that the house had not killed him. It had preserved him. He was not a ghost haunting the house. He was the house. I woke up with a decision already forming in my mind. Running was no longer enough. Ignoring it only gave it time to grow more patient, more inventive. If I wanted it to stop, I had to confront it on its own ground. I returned to Oregon in late autumn, years after I swore I never would. The town outside Ashland looked unchanged, as if time had politely stepped around it. Maple Thorn Road was quieter than I remembered. Fewer houses. More trees. Briarwood Place still stood at the end, hedges taller than ever, porch sagging under the weight of neglect. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air felt alive, humming with recognition. The walls creaked softly, not threatening, almost welcoming. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, the sound echoing deeper than it should have. I spoke aloud, my voice shaking but steady enough. "I know who you are." The house responded with a low groan, settling around me. "You remember," the voice said. "That is why you came back." I walked through each room slowly, deliberately, reclaiming my memories as I went. I spoke Merrick's name. I told him he had been heard, that his suffering had not been invisible, even if it had been ignored for too long. The pressure in the air shifted. The walls trembled. The temperature rose, then fell like a breath being released after decades of holding it in. I do not know how long I stood there. Minutes, hours. Time lost its shape inside that house. But when I finally stepped back outside, the smell was gone. The hedges rustled gently in the breeze. The windows were dark. For the first time, the house felt empty. Briarwood Place was demolished the following spring. No incidents. No protests. Just wood, dust, and silence where it once stood. I wish I could say that was the end. Even now, years later, when I pass an empty lot at the edge of town, when the wind carries the faintest hint of rust and damp earth, I feel it. Not watching. Not waiting. Remembering. And I understand something I did not before. Some houses do not want to trap you forever. Some just want to be acknowledged before they finally let you go. Acknowledgement did not bring peace. It brought a quieter kind of fear, the kind that settles deep and waits for moments of weakness. After Briarwood Place was reduced to rubble, I stayed in Oregon for several weeks, telling myself I needed closure. In truth, I was afraid to leave. Afraid that distance would make it harder to notice if something followed again. The empty lot felt wrong. Grass refused to grow evenly, leaving pale patches of dirt shaped like rooms that no longer existed. On certain evenings, when the light faded just enough, I could almost trace the outline of the house by instinct alone. My feet would slow at the edge of the property, my chest tightening as if crossing an invisible threshold. Nothing ever happened there. No voices. No footsteps. Just silence so complete it rang in my ears. That silence should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a held breath. I returned home eventually. Life resumed its rhythm, uneven but familiar. I found work that kept my hands busy and my thoughts occupied. I learned how to sleep again, though never deeply, never without dreams brushing close to the surface. Friends said I seemed calmer, lighter. I let them believe it. Years passed. The first sign that something was wrong came quietly, almost gently. I began to lose time. It started with small gaps. I would drive somewhere familiar and arrive without remembering the route. I would read the same paragraph repeatedly, unable to recall the words moments later. Once I found myself standing in my kitchen at dawn, barefoot, the back door open, cold air spilling in. I had no memory of waking up or of unlocking the door. I blamed stress, fatigue, age creeping in faster than expected. Then the dreams changed. The house no longer appeared as Briarwood Place. Instead, it appeared as wherever I was. My apartment. A friend's guest room. A motel during a work trip. In the dreams, the walls subtly shifted, corners stretching just enough to feel wrong. Doors led to rooms that should not exist. Windows looked out onto nothing but darkness. And always, there was the sense of being guided. Not forced. Encouraged. One night, in the dream, I followed a hallway that seemed to grow longer with every step. At the end stood a door I did not recognize. When I opened it, I did not see another room. I saw myself. Older. Thinner. Eyes hollowed by exhaustion. He stood motionless, hands pressed flat against the inside of the frame as if holding something back. When he spoke, his voice was layered, familiar, and foreign at once. "You stayed too long," he said. I woke up screaming. After that, the gaps grew wider. Entire evenings vanished. I would find receipts for places I did not remember visiting. Gas stations miles out of the way. Hardware stores. Antique shops. Once, disturbingly, a real estate office. I started recording myself before bed, setting up a camera in the corner of the room. At first, nothing happened. I slept. I shifted. I murmured unintelligible fragments of dreams. On the seventh night, the footage changed everything. At 3:12 in the morning, I sat up. Not slowly. Not groggily. I moved with deliberate calm, eyes open, focused. I stood, walked out of frame, and returned several minutes later carrying something heavy. I placed it carefully on the table beneath the camera. A key. Blackened. Identical to the one that had appeared on my blueprints years ago. I watched the footage until my hands went numb. At no point did I look surprised. At no point did I hesitate. I did not remember any of it. That was when I understood the truth I had been avoiding. The house was gone, but Merrick was not. He had never been confined to wood and nails. Briarwood Place had been a vessel, a shape that gave his suffering structure. When it was destroyed, that structure collapsed. What remained needed somewhere else to settle. It needed someone who remembered. I sought help, though I did not tell the whole truth. Therapists spoke of trauma loops, dissociation, the mind's ability to externalize pain. Medication dulled the edges but did not stop the dreams. Priests offered prayers that made the air feel briefly lighter, then heavier than before. Nothing addressed the presence that now felt less like an invader and more like an echo sharing my bones. One evening, while sorting through old boxes, I found my notebooks. The ones filled with dates, times, sensations. Patterns I had documented long ago. As I read through them, a realization took shape, cold and precise. The house had never wanted to keep me forever. It wanted continuity. Merrick had been alone. Forgotten. Erased by time and sealed walls. When I listened, when I acknowledged him, I became the first witness to his existence in decades. That bond did not end with the house. It transferred. I began to feel him in moments of stillness. Not as a voice, but as a weight of memory. Emotions that were not mine surfaced without warning. Panic at enclosed spaces. Rage at locked doors. Despair so deep it felt geological. And beneath it all, a fragile, desperate need. To be known. The final change came slowly, then all at once. I started to notice how people reacted to my home. Guests hesitated at the doorway. Conversations fell quiet inside. No one stayed long. Some complained of headaches. Others of nausea. One friend, pale and shaken, asked me if something had happened in my apartment before I moved in. I looked around my living room at the walls that now seemed just slightly too close and understood. I am writing this now because I do not know how much time I have left as myself. The gaps are wider. The dreams are clearer. Sometimes I catch my reflection holding expressions I did not choose. I have started renovating. Not out of necessity but instinct. Adding walls. Narrowing hallways. Creating spaces that feel familiar in ways I cannot explain. The work feels right. Grounding. When I hammer a nail into place, the ache in my chest eases. If you are listening to this, if you are hearing my story late at night and you feel a strange pull toward old houses, abandoned places, rooms that seem to remember you, be careful. Listening is powerful. Surviving a house does not always mean leaving it behind. Sometimes, survival means becoming the place where the memories live, waiting quietly for the next person who hears the walls breathe and decides to listen. I used to believe that awareness would give me control. That if I could name what was happening, chart its patterns, anticipate its movements, I could stay ahead of it. That belief faded the night I realized I was no longer renovating my home for myself. The walls had changed. Not dramatically. Not enough for someone else to notice right away. But I noticed. The hallway outside my bedroom had narrowed by a few inches. The door frames felt taller, forcing me to tilt my head slightly when I passed through. The air inside carried that familiar stillness, the kind that swallowed sound instead of reflecting it. I stopped inviting people over. It was easier than explaining why they looked uneasy the moment they stepped inside. Why their eyes drifted toward corners as if something had moved there a moment before. Why they always made excuses to leave early, their relief barely hidden when they crossed back outside. At night I began to hear it again. Not footsteps. Not knocking. Something subtler. Settling. The sound a house makes when it adjusts to weight it has carried for a long time. I tried to fight it. I tore down one of the new walls I had built during a night I barely remembered. The next morning I found it standing again, reconstructed with cleaner edges than before. The tools were neatly arranged beside it, wiped down as if someone else had taken pride in the work. I had the unsettling realization that I was no longer alone inside my own mind. Memories surfaced that were not mine. I would be struck by vivid sensations with no context. The sting of cold seeping through bare feet on winter floors. The frustration of a door that would not open no matter how hard I pulled. The slow erosion of hope that comes from screaming into a space that absorbs every sound. Merrick was not whispering to me. He was remembering through me. I started leaving recordings not for proof anymore, but as a way to anchor myself. Each morning I listened to my own voice from the night before, reminding myself who I was, where I was, what year it was. Sometimes the recordings helped. Other times I noticed pauses that felt wrong. Gaps where the room tone shifted subtly, as if someone else had leaned close to the microphone. One recording ended with a sentence I did not remember saying. "It's easier when you stop resisting." That was the moment I understood what was coming. Merrick had not survived Briarwood Place by accident. He had endured by adapting, by allowing the house to shape him until the boundary between man and structure dissolved. He had not been consumed. He had merged. And now, slowly, carefully, that same process was unfolding again. I tried to leave. I packed a bag and drove for hours without a destination. The farther I went, the heavier my chest felt, as if invisible walls were closing in around me. At a rest stop just before dawn, I fell asleep in the driver's seat. I woke up in my own bed. The bag was unpacked. The car keys were back on the hook by the door. Mud tracked across the floor, forming footprints that stopped just short of the bedroom. I stopped trying to escape after that. Instead, I focused on containment. If Merrick needed a structure, I would give him one. Not a house that could draw others in, but a place that could hold what remained of him without spreading. I sealed off rooms. Soundproofed walls. Reduced windows until light entered only in narrow bands. The outside world began to feel distant, unreal. Inside, everything felt precise, purposeful, balanced. I noticed that when I leaned into the work, the pressure eased. The dreams softened. Merrick's memories receded, replaced by something quieter. Gratitude, perhaps. Or relief. He was no longer alone. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in the narrowest room of the house, listening to the gentle creaks and shifts. I speak aloud, telling him about the world as it is now. About the way towns grow and vanish. About how people move constantly, never staying long enough to leave deep marks. He listens. I know he does because the walls feel warmer when I speak. Less tense. As if the house itself is settling into the sound of my voice. I do not think of myself as trapped anymore. That word implies struggle. This feels more like a responsibility I did not ask for but have accepted. Someone has to remember. Someone has to hold the weight of what was lost. Still, there are moments when curiosity flickers. When I wonder who will come next. Because despite everything I have done to keep this place quiet, contained, hidden, I have started to notice small signs. A light lingering in the window longer than I remember leaving it on. The faint smell of rust drifting just beyond the front door. A pause in conversation when delivery drivers step inside, their eyes unfocused, their voices uncertain. Listening is powerful. And there are always those who listen too closely. If you ever find yourself standing in a quiet house, late at night, feeling the strange certainty that the walls are aware of you, remember this. Survival is not always about escape. Sometimes, it is about what you choose to carry forward. Because houses do not die. They wait. And one day when I am gone, when my voice finally fades into the structure I have built, this place will still be here. Calm, patient, ready. Waiting for someone new to notice that the silence feels a little too intentional, and to decide as I once did to listen. Time no longer moves the way it used to. Days still pass, marked by light and darkness, by hunger and fatigue, but the meaning behind them has thinned. What matters now is rhythm. The slow, steady breathing of the house. The way the walls respond to my presence, tightening when I am anxious, relaxing when I am calm. We are learning each other even now. I still go outside. I force myself to. Short walks at first, then longer ones, tracing familiar streets until they no longer feel hostile. The world beyond my front door remains intact. Cars pass. Children laugh somewhere down the block. Life continues without noticing what waits quietly behind my walls. But every time I return, I feel it. The subtle shift as I cross the threshold. the air inside welcoming me back, heavy with recognition. It feels less like entering a building now and more like stepping into a shared body. I have stopped questioning how much of me remains separate. There are moments, brief but sharp, when I feel panic surge. When I catch my reflection and see my expression lag a fraction of a second behind my thoughts. When my hands linger on door frames, fingers pressing into the wood as if confirming it is still solid, still real. During those moments, I remind myself to breathe, to anchor, to remember my name. Calder Haynes. Sometimes the name feels distant. Other times, it feels like an echo bouncing back from somewhere deep inside the walls. I keep records still, though their purpose has changed. They are no longer warnings or evidence. They are instructions. Notes on what stabilizes the structure. What causes agitation. What attracts attention from outside. I have learned, for example, that silence is not always best. Too much of it creates a vacuum, something that curious minds instinctively try to fill. Soft sound helps. Low voices. Music played quietly without lyrics. It keeps the balance. I have also learned that the house remembers things I do not. Sometimes, late at night, I will find small changes I cannot explain. A nail driven more securely. A crack sealed. A weak point reinforced. The work is careful, almost tender. Merrick's influence no longer feels heavy. It feels diffused, spread evenly through the structure. His memories surface less often now. When they do, they arrive without the sharp edge of despair. They feel processed, like grief that has been sat with for a very long time. I think this is what he wanted all along. Not escape. Not release. Just continuity without suffering. There was an incident last winter that reminded me why containment matters. A young couple moved into the rental house across the street. Friendly. Curious. The kind of people who wave, who ask questions, who notice details others ignore. One evening, as they walked past my house, I saw them slow, their conversation trailing off. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something just beyond hearing. That night, the house grew restless. The walls creaked more than usual. The air thickened. I felt a pull toward the front door, a familiar tension I had worked hard to suppress. I understood then that the structure recognized curiosity the way a predator recognizes movement. I acted quickly. I adjusted the lighting, dimming it until the windows reflected more than they revealed. I increased the background noise. I spoke aloud, steady and calm, grounding the space. It passed. The next day, the couple avoided looking at my house. Within a month, they moved out, citing vague discomfort they could not explain. I felt no satisfaction in that. Only relief. I am not proud of what I have become, but I am no longer afraid of it either. The idea of leaving behind a legacy once meant children, work, memories carried by others. Now, it means something else. It means ensuring that this place remains quiet. That it does not call out. That it does not hunger. Because hunger is dangerous. There are nights when I feel myself thinning, when my thoughts drift too easily, when I struggle to recall details that once defined me. During those times, I ground myself with routine. I cook familiar meals. I read old books, running my fingers along the pages, reminding myself of texture, of weight, of linear stories with beginnings and endings. Endings matter. I do not know how long I can maintain this balance. I suspect there will come a time when my presence is no longer enough, when the structure will require something more permanent. I have prepared for that possibility. Documents arranged. Instructions written. Safeguards put in place to ensure no one stumbles into this responsibility unknowingly. If this story reaches you, if you are hearing my voice carried through another medium, understand this. I'm not asking for help. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for awareness. Pay attention to the places you enter. If a house feels too quiet, too attentive, if it seems to respond to your emotions rather than simply containing them, leave. Do not listen too closely. Do not answer when it feels like the walls are waiting for you to speak. And if you ever hear someone say they survived a house, remember that survival can take many forms. Some people walk away. Some people stay. And some people become the reason the rest of the world sleeps peacefully, unaware of what has been contained patiently behind closed doors. There are limits to containment, even when you believe you have accounted for every weakness. I learned that on a night when the house did not creak, did not shift, did not breathe the way it usually does, the silence was different. Not calm. Expectant. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the same one I had refinished months earlier, running my fingers along the grain of the wood, grounding myself in its texture. Outside, rain fell steadily, a sound I usually welcome because it blurred the edges of the world. That night it only sharpened them. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I felt a subtle pull, not toward a specific room but inward, as if something inside me had turned its attention away from the structure and toward a thought I had not meant to entertain. What happens when I am gone? The question did not feel like mine alone. I stood and walked the perimeter of the house, checking doors, windows, seals. Everything was as it should be. Too much so. The walls felt rigid, tense, like muscles held tight for too long. I spoke aloud, calmly, reminding the space of its purpose, of the balance we had maintained. The words echoed strangely, as if the house were listening from a greater distance than usual. Then I heard it. A sound from outside. Footsteps on the porch. Not the imagined kind. Not the internal creaks and murmurs I had grown accustomed to. These were real, deliberate, carrying the faint scrape of wet soles against wood. My chest tightened. No one ever came this late. No one ever lingered. 3 knocks followed. Slow. Even. Patient. For a moment I could not move. I felt the structure react, a ripple of awareness spreading through the walls. Not hunger. Not excitement. Something closer to recognition. I went to the door. Through the peephole, I saw a man standing just outside the reach of the porch light. Middle-aged. Unremarkable. He wore a rain-soaked jacket and held a phone loosely at his side. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were fixed on the door with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I opened it a few inches. He smiled, relieved. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," he said. "My car broke down a block away. I was hoping to use a phone. Mine's dead." His voice was steady. Normal. Human. Behind me the air shifted. I hesitated, feeling the pressure build, the house subtly leaning toward the opening I had created. This was the moment I had prepared for, written warnings about, rehearsed in my mind countless times. Do not invite. I stepped outside instead, closing the door carefully behind me. The pressure eased just slightly. "I can make the call for you," I said. The man's smile faltered. Just for a second. His eyes flicked past me toward the house, as if he could sense something just beyond his perception. "It's warm in there," he said softly. "Quiet too." The word quiet landed wrong. The house responded, a low vibration I felt through the soles of my feet. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep my tone casual. "I'll call roadside assistance." As I spoke into my phone, I felt the man's attention drift. Not away from the house, but inward, as if he were listening to something else. His brow furrowed. He shifted his weight, uneasy. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I shook my head. "Rain," I said. "Just rain." He frowned, unconvinced, but when I handed him the phone with confirmation that help was on the way, he thanked me and stepped back down the porch steps. He did not look at the house again. When he was gone, I stood outside for a long time, letting the rain soak into my clothes, steadying myself. Only when I was certain the street was empty did I go back inside. The door closed with a heavy finality. That night the house was restless. Not aggressive. Anxious. I felt it probing at my thoughts, brushing against memories of Briarwood Place, of the moment I first listened, first acknowledged. It was testing the boundaries we had established. I understood then that containment was not a permanent solution. It was a delay. The structure needed a successor. Not immediately. Not tomorrow. But someday. Someone who could hear the difference between silence and attention. Someone who would not run at the first sign of awareness, but would stay long enough to understand the responsibility. The idea terrified me, because it meant that my role was not just to contain, but to choose. I began to watch people more closely after that. Not with predatory intent, but with careful evaluation. Delivery drivers, neighbors, strangers passing by. Most felt wrong immediately, their presence jarring against the delicate balance inside. Some lingered in a way that made the walls tighten, instinctively rejecting them. And then one afternoon I felt something shift. A woman stopped on the sidewalk across the street, staring at the house with quiet curiosity. Not fear. Not excitement. Recognition. The kind that comes when something unnamed aligns with an internal frequency. The house did not lean toward her. It waited. I felt a cold certainty settle in my chest. This was how it continued. Not by force. Not by accident. By resonance. I'm not ready to act on that knowledge yet. I'm still here. Still holding. Still myself for now. But the awareness has changed everything. The house does not need to trap people. It needs someone willing to listen, to stay, to carry what cannot be allowed to spread. And someday, whether by age or exhaustion or a moment of weakness, I will not be enough. When that day comes, the house will still be quiet from the outside. Ordinary. Forgettable. And someone, somewhere, will feel that subtle pull, the sense that a place is paying attention to them. When they step inside, I hope they understand what they are choosing. Because surviving a house is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a responsibility that does not fade, does not forgive, and does not ever truly let go. I began to dream of blueprints again. They were never the same twice, yet every line felt familiar, as if my hands had drawn them long ago. In these dreams, I stood over a wide table beneath a single hanging light, the paper spread out before me, breathing softly, the ink lines shifting when I was not looking directly at them. Rooms expanded or narrowed depending on where my attention lingered. Hallways curved subtly, guiding movement without appearing to do so. The house was teaching me. When I woke from these dreams, fragments remained. Measurements, angles, an instinctive understanding of where weight should be carried and where space must be denied. I started sketching them out while awake, afraid they would fade if I did not anchor them in something physical. The drawings filled a notebook, then several. I did not label them. I did not date them. I knew better. This was not planning. It was preparation. The woman across the street appeared again 2 weeks later. This time, she stood closer, pretending to scroll through her phone while her eyes lifted again and again toward my windows. I felt the house register her presence immediately, not with eagerness but with focus. The air inside tightened, then steadied like a breath taken and held. I stayed away from the windows. I did not speak. I let the house observe without interference. She left after a few minutes, her expression thoughtful rather than relieved. That unsettled me more than fear ever could. Over the following months, she became a quiet constant. Sometimes she passed by without stopping. Other times she paused, always at different distances, as if testing how close she could get before something pushed back. I learned her routines without meaning to. Morning walks, evening returns. A life structured, predictable, anchored. Resilient. The house approved. I fought the realization with everything I had left. I reminded myself that this was not my decision to make, that no one deserved to inherit this burden simply because they were compatible with it. I reinforced boundaries, increased sound, reduced visibility. For a while the attention receded. But houses, like memories, do not forget. The first crack came from within me. I woke one morning unable to remember the previous day at all. No impressions, no emotions, just a clean, empty stretch of time where my life should have been. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, flipping through my notebooks, grounding myself in handwriting that looked like mine but felt distant. That was when I noticed the change in the walls. They were smoother. Not newly finished, not repaired, but worn in a way that suggested long use, like surfaces shaped by years of touch. The house was aging faster than it should have, adapting in ways that no renovation could explain. It was preparing for permanence. I began to leave messages for myself throughout the house. Notes tucked into drawers. Phrases written lightly in pencil behind picture frames. Simple truths. My name. The year. Why this place must remain contained. They helped at first. Then one morning I found one of the notes altered. The handwriting was still mine. The words were not. This helps no one. I stood there for a long time, paper trembling between my fingers, until I felt the familiar settling sensation around me, not hostile but firm. The house was asserting itself, not against me but beyond me. I realized then that I was no longer the sole anchor. I was becoming a layer. That knowledge hollowed me in a way I cannot fully describe. I had defined myself for so long by resistance, by vigilance, by the belief that I was choosing this role. Now I understood that choice had a half-life. Over time, it decayed into inevitability. I saw the woman again that evening. She stood closer than ever before, right at the edge of the property line, her face pale, eyes unfocused. I felt a surge of panic and stepped outside before I could stop myself. She startled slightly when she saw me. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to stare. Your house feels different. Does that make sense?" Every instinct screamed at me to shut the conversation down, to send her away, to protect her from this place and protect the place from her. But something else rose up, quieter and heavier. Understanding. "It does," I said carefully. She hesitated, then exhaled as if relieved. I thought I was imagining it. Sometimes I feel like places notice me, like they remember things. The house stirred. I felt it then, unmistakably. Not hunger. Not desire. Recognition. I ended the conversation as gently as I could, making excuses, retreating back inside with my heart hammering against my ribs. The door closed, the latch sliding into place with a sound that felt far too final. That night, the dream stopped being symbolic. I dreamed of the future. Not in images, but in sensations. The weight of years pressing down. My voice growing quieter. My body slowing. The house remaining constant, patient, holding everything I could no longer carry. I felt myself thinning, spreading, my awareness seeping into the structure the way Merrick's once had. I woke with tears on my face and the certainty that I was running out of time. I do not know when the transition will complete. I only know that it will not be dramatic. No sudden vanishing. No single moment of loss. Just a gradual shift, a handover so subtle that the outside world will never notice. One day I will stop going outside. One day the house will answer questions before I think to ask them. One day the walls will remember more of me than I do. If you are still listening, understand this above all else. Places that feel alive are not evil. They are not malicious. They are accumulations of attention, memory, and need. When those things are ignored for too long, they seek balance in whatever way they can. I survived that house once. Now I am becoming the reason others never have to. And somewhere across the street or down the road or years from now in a different town, someone will feel that familiar pull, that quiet certainty that a place is paying attention to them. When that happens, the house will be ready. And so will I, in whatever form remains. The last thing I remember clearly is the sound of breathing that was not mine. It came from the walls, from the floor beneath my feet, from the ceiling pressing low above my head. Not loud. Not urgent. Steady. Content. As if the house had finally found a rhythm it liked. I stopped leaving the front door unlocked after that, though I no longer remembered making the choice. Some mornings I woke in rooms I did not recall entering. Other mornings I woke already standing, my hand resting against the wall, fingers spread, feeling vibrations that felt like thoughts. My reflection changed slowly enough that I could pretend it was nothing. My eyes lingered on corners instead of people. My posture leaned inward, protective, possessive. When I spoke aloud, my voice echoed back warmer than it should have, layered with something older. The woman across the street stopped walking past my house. I noticed her absence immediately. The house noticed it too. For days there was tension. A tightening. The air felt compressed, restless. I tried to distract it with sound, with movement, with routine, but nothing settled it completely. Something unfinished lingered at the edges of my awareness. Then one evening I heard footsteps on the porch again. 3 steps. Slow. Careful. I did not feel fear. I felt relief. The knock came. 3 times. Even. Familiar. I stood in the hallway, aware that I had already opened the door before realizing I had moved. The porch light revealed the woman from across the street. Her face looked tired. Drawn. Her eyes were ringed with shadows, but there was something else there too. Understanding. "I don't know why I'm here," she said softly. "I just know I couldn't stop thinking about this place. Feels like it needs someone." Behind me the house settled. The sound was deep and final, like a lock sliding into place. I stepped aside without thinking, my body moving with practiced ease, and gestured for her to come in. She hesitated only a second before crossing the threshold. The moment her foot touched the floor, the air warmed. The door closed on its own. I watched her take in the space, her breathing slowing, her shoulders relaxing as if she had finally arrived somewhere she belonged. The walls leaned in, not aggressively but attentively, patiently. She smiled at me, a small, uncertain smile. "It's quiet," she said. "In a good way." I opened my mouth to answer, to warn her, to say something that might still matter. Nothing came out. The house spoke instead. Not in words she could hear yet, but in sensations, in comfort, in recognition. I felt myself recede, thinning like fog burned away by morning light. My memories loosened their grip, slipping into the walls, into the floors, into the careful geometry I had drawn so long ago. As she took her first steps down the hallway, I realized the truth too late. The house had never needed a successor. It needed witnesses. And now, with someone new listening so closely, it no longer needed me at all. The last human thought I had was not fear. It was the certainty that someday soon someone else would walk past this house, feel that quiet pull in their chest, and wonder why the lights inside always seemed warm, and why, if they listened very carefully, they could almost hear two sets of breathing perfectly in sync, waiting for them to knock.